They looked at his worn-out coat and saw a nobody. The high-powered bankers at Table 4 mocked him. The manager tried to hide him in the corner, and the world ignored him. They thought he was just a confused, older French tourist who couldn't understand their insults. But they made one fatal calculation error. They didn't know that the quiet girl pouring their water, Chloe, had a secret past in Paris. And they certainly didn't know that the nobody they were ignoring was Jean-Luc Valois, the man who was about to decide the fate of their entire company. When the waitress finally spoke up in flawless French, the silence in the room wasn't just awkward, it was expensive. Here is the story of how a little kindness destroyed a massive ego. The lunch rush at l'Orangerie, one of Manhattan's most pretentious midtown establishments, was not for the faint of heart. It was a theater of war, where the weapons were Amex black cards, and the casualties were usually the wait staff. Chloe Evans adjusted her apron, trying to hide the stain on her cuff. She was 26, tired, and currently invisible. That was the job. You weren't a person. You were a vessel for sparkling water and overpriced Cobb salads. "Excuse me, sweetheart, we've been waiting 10 minutes for the wine list," a voice boomed from the center of the room. It was Sterling Vance. Everyone knew Sterling. He was a junior partner at Halloway & Finch, a private equity firm down the street. He was 32, wore suits that cost more than Chloe's car, and possessed the kind of arrogance that only comes from never hearing the word no. "I apologize, Mr. Vance," Chloe said, rushing over, her head bowed slightly. "The sommelier is currently with the mayor's table." "I don't care if he's with the Pope," Sterling snapped, gesturing to the 3 other men at his table, his entourage of junior analysts. "We have a billion-dollar merger to discuss. We need the 82 Margot. Now." "I'll see what I can do," Chloe murmured, retreating. As she turned, she nearly collided with a man standing awkwardly near the hostess stand. The hostess, a sharply dressed woman named Jessica, who prided herself on being the gatekeeper of the elite, was ignoring him entirely while typing on her iPad. The man looked out of place. He was older, perhaps in his early 60s, with salt and pepper hair that was wind-blown. He wore a tweed jacket that looked comfortable but dated, and a scarf loosely draped around his neck. He didn't look poor exactly, but in a room full of Italian silk and Swiss watches, he looked tragically ordinary. "Excuse me," the man said softly. His voice was gravelly, heavily accented. "I have a reservation under Valois." Jessica didn't look up. "One moment, sir. I'm handling a VIP seating." The man stood there, clutching a worn leather notebook. He looked tired. He looked like a grandfather waiting for a bus, not a patron of l'Orangerie. Chloe felt a pang of sympathy. She knew what it felt like to be looked through. She stepped around the bar. "Jessica," she whispered, "that gentleman has been standing there for 5 minutes." Jessica rolled her eyes, finally looking up at the man. "Name?" "Valois," he repeated. "Jean-Luc." Jessica tapped a manicured fingernail on the screen. "I don't see a Valois. I have a Val-Oise for a single at 1 p.m. She butchered the pronunciation so badly it hurt Chloe's ears. "Yes," the man nodded politely. "That is me." "Right. Well, look, we're overbooked. The only thing I have is table 9. Table 9 was the penalty box. It was right next to the swinging kitchen doors and directly under the air conditioning vent. It was where they put tourists they never wanted to see again. "That will be fine," the man said, though he pulled his scarf tighter as he glanced at the drafty corner. As he walked past Sterling Vance's table to get to his exile, Sterling let out a loud, barking laugh. "Check out the coat," Sterling jeered, loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. "Looks like he robbed a thrift store in 1970. Hey, Pappy, the soup kitchen is 3 blocks down." The analysts at the table erupted in laughter. The older man paused. He didn't turn around. He just stiffened slightly, his grip on his leather notebook tightening until his knuckles turned white. Then, with a quiet dignity that went unnoticed by the room, he continued to the bad table near the kitchen. Chloe felt a flush of anger heat her neck. It wasn't just rude, it was cruel. She looked at the manager, Mr. Henderson, hoping he would intervene. Henderson was busy pouring wine for a tech CEO, and pointedly looked away. Sterling Vance spent $10,000 a month here. The old man in the tweed coat probably wouldn't spend 50. In Henderson's math, the insult was permissible. Chloe grabbed a pitcher of water. "I'll take table 9, she told Jessica. "Suit yourself," Jessica smirked. "Don't expect a tip. He looks like he counts his pennies." Chloe walked over to the small, wobbly table near the kitchen doors. The cold air from the vent was blasting down, ruffling the man's grey hair. He was staring at the menu, but his eyes looked distant. "Good afternoon, sir," Chloe said, putting on her warmest, most genuine smile. She placed the water down gently, not slamming it like the other servers did when they were in a rush. "My name is Chloe. I'm sorry about the draft. If a better table opens up, I'll move you immediately." The man looked up. His eyes were a piercing, surprising blue, sharp and intelligent, contrasting with his weary demeanor. He looked at her name tag, then up at her face. "Thank you, Chloe," he said, pronouncing her name the French way, Chloe. "But do not worry. I am used to, how do you say, the cold shoulder." He smiled a little, a sad, knowing smile. "Can I start you off with something to drink? A glass of wine, perhaps?" He hesitated, glancing at the prices. "Just a coffee, please. Black. And perhaps the onion soup." "Excellent choice," Chloe lied. The onion soup was mostly salt and grease, but she didn't have the heart to tell him. "I'll make sure it comes out piping hot." As she walked away, she had to pass Sterling Vance's table again. "Hey, sweetheart," Sterling shouted, snapping his fingers. "Did you get lost? We need bread, and tell the manager I want that old guy moved. He's looking at us. It's killing my appetite." The man wasn't looking at them. He was writing in his notebook. "He's just eating lunch, Mr. Vance," Chloe said, her voice tight. "He's an eyesore," Sterling sneered, leaning back and swirling his wine. "Probably doesn't even speak English. Just nods and grunts. Look at him. It's pathetic. This place is going downhill if they let just anyone in." He switched his gaze to his colleagues. "That's the problem with the European market right now," Sterling pontificated, his voice carrying. "It's old, it's dusty, like that guy. No innovation. That's why we're going to crush them on the acquisition of Leclerc Pharma. The French are too polite to fight back. They'll roll over. They always do." Chloe's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She knew she shouldn't. She needed this job. Her student loans from her time abroad were crippling, and her mother's medical bills were piling up. She needed the tips. She needed Sterling Vance to be happy. But as she looked back at table 9, seeing the dignified man sipping his water while the air conditioner blasted him, something inside her snapped, not a violent snap, but a quiet resolution. She wouldn't just serve him, she would treat him like a king. Chloe returned to the kitchen. "Chef," she called out to the line cook, "Marco, table 9, the onion soup. But please, Marco, make it the real way. Don't use the pre-made stock. Use the reserve from the short ribs." Marco, a burly man with tattoos up his neck, looked at her. "For who?" "The VIP." "No," Chloe said, "for a gentleman who is having a very bad day." Marco looked at her, then shrugged. "For you, Chloe." "Okay. 2 minutes." She prepared the coffee herself, ensuring the cup was warmed first, and placed a fresh biscotti on the saucer. something usually reserved only for the dinner service. When she returned to the floor, the atmosphere had grown more toxic. Sterling Vance was now standing up, loudly recounting a story about a wild weekend in Ibiza, while mimicking a French accent that was borderline offensive. The man at table 9 had stopped writing. He was staring at his hands. He looked small. Chloe approached the table and set the coffee down. Then she did something she hadn't done in 3 years. Not since she left Paris in tears, leaving behind a degree in linguistics and a broken heart. "Monsieur," she said softly, her voice dropping an octave, shifting into the rhythmic, guttural elegance of a native Parisian. "Désolé pour l'attente. J'ai demandé au chef de préparer la soupe spécialement pour vous. Elle sera meilleure ainsi. Sir, sorry for the wait. I asked the chef to prepare the soup especially for you. It will be better this way." The man's head snapped up. The notebook slid slightly under his hand. The weariness in his eyes vanished, replaced by a spark of electric shock. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. Vous parlez français?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. You speak French?" Chloe smiled, and for a moment the noisy New York restaurant melted away. "Oui, j'ai vécu à Paris pendant 3 ans. Études à la Sorbonne, la littérature." "Yes, I lived in Paris for 3 years, studies at the Sorbonne, literature." The man's face transformed. It was like watching the sun break through heavy storm clouds. His shoulders dropped 3 inches. The tension left his jaw. He wasn't just a lonely old man anymore. He was a human being who had been found. "C'est incroyable," he whispered, a genuine smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Personne ne parle ma langue ici. Ils aboient tous comme des chiens. It's incredible. No one speaks my language here. They all bark like dogs." He gestured subtly toward Sterling's table. Chloe stifled a giggle. "Les chiens qui aboient ne mordent pas, monsieur," she replied swiftly, using an old idiom. "Barking dogs don't bite, sir." Jean-Luc let out a laugh, a deep belly laugh that drew a few eyes from nearby tables. "Touché, Chloe?" "Touché." He leaned forward, his demeanor shifting from passive to engaged. "Tell me, why is a Sorbonne graduate serving coffee to, how did he call me, Pappy?" "Life," Chloe said, switching back to English briefly as she saw the manager watching her. "Life is complicated. Plans change." "Plans?" Jean-Luc nodded sagely. "Yes. I had plans for today, too. I was supposed to meet a very important man, a banker. But—" He looked around the room, his eyes hardening slightly. "I think I learned more by sitting here alone than I would have in his boardroom." "I'm sorry they were rude to you," Chloe said quietly. "Do not be sorry," Jean-Luc said, waving a hand dismissively. "You learn a man's true character by how he treats those he thinks can do nothing for him. That man," he nodded toward Sterling Vance, "he thinks he is a king because he has a loud voice. But he is—" Jean-Luc searched for the word. "Un parvenu," Chloe suggested. "An upstart nouveau riche." Jean-Luc beamed. "Exactement." For the next 20 minutes, Chloe checked on him frequently. They spoke in hushed French. He told her he was from Lyon originally, but lived in Paris. He told her he was in New York for business restructuring. She told him about her mother's illness, briefly, without asking for pity. She told him how much she missed the bakery on Rue Claire. It was the most human interaction she had experienced in months. But the bubble had to burst. Sterling Vance, fueled by 3 glasses of Cabernet, had noticed the camaraderie. He didn't like it. He didn't like that the bum was smiling. He didn't like that the waitress was giving table 9 more attention than table 4. "Hey!" Sterling shouted, slamming his hand on the table. The silverware rattled. The entire restaurant went silent. Chloe froze. "Yes, Mr. Vance?" she asked, turning to face him. "I've been waving for the check for 5 minutes," Sterling lied, "and you're over there chit-chatting with the homeless guy in some gibberish language. Is this a restaurant or a social club?" "I apologize, sir," Chloe said, keeping her voice steady. "I was just ensuring his order was correct." "I don't care," Sterling spat. He stood up, swaying slightly. He was a big man, and he used his size to intimidate. He walked toward Chloe, invading her personal space. "You know, I spend more on one lunch than you make in a month. I expect service, I expect respect, and I don't expect to be ignored for him." He pointed a thick finger at Jean-Luc. Jean-Luc slowly placed his coffee cup down. The ceramic made a sharp clink on the saucer. "Is there a problem?" Jean-Luc asked. His English was slow, heavily accented, but his tone was no longer that of a tired grandfather. It was cold. It was steel. Sterling laughed. "Oh, he speaks. Yeah, there's a problem, Pappy. You're ruining the ambiance. And you," he turned back to Chloe, "I'm going to have a word with your manager. In fact, Henderson." Mr. Henderson rushed over, looking panicked. "Yes, Mr. Vance? Is everything all right?" "No, it's not," Sterling said, adjusting his tie. "This waitress is incompetent. She's been ignoring my table to flirt with this vagrant. It's insulting. I want her fired, or I take my firm's corporate account to Le Bernardin." Chloe's blood ran cold. The corporate account was worth $50,000 a year to the restaurant. Henderson looked at Chloe, then at the account holder. There was no hesitation. "Chloe," Henderson said sharply, "go to the office. Clock out." "But," Chloe started, tears pricking her eyes. "Now," Henderson barked. "Mr. Vance, I am so sorry. We will comp your wine. Please, sit." Sterling smirked, a look of pure, malicious triumph on his face. He looked at Jean-Luc. "See that? That's how the world works. Money talks. You walk." Jean-Luc stood up. He wasn't a tall man, but suddenly he seemed to fill the room. He picked up his worn leather notebook. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a bill, a single $100 bill, and placed it gently on the table. "Keep the change, Chloe," he said softly, his eyes locked on hers. "And do not worry. This," he gestured to the room, to Henderson, to Sterling. "This is not the end of the story." He turned to Sterling. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He simply looked at the banker with an expression of profound disappointment, like a teacher looking at a child who had failed a simple test. "You have a meeting at 3 p.m., Jean-Luc said. It wasn't a question. Sterling blinked, confused. "What?" "The merger. Leclerc Farmer." Jean-Luc said the words clearly. Sterling's face went pale. "How do you know about that? That's non-public info." Jean-Luc didn't answer. He just buttoned his tweed coat. "I suggest you are not late. The chairman is very particular about manners." With that, Jean-Luc walked out of the restaurant. The silence he left behind was heavy. Sterling looked at his analysts. "Who the hell was that?" "Probably just read it in the paper," one analyst said nervously. "Ignore him, Sterling. You got the girl fired. You won." Sterling sat back down, but he looked uneasy. "Yeah, I won." Chloe, standing by the kitchen door, wiped a tear from her cheek. She took off her apron. She had lost her job because she spoke French to a lonely old man. She grabbed her bag and walked out the back door into the alley, sobbing. She didn't see the black Maybach parked around the corner. She didn't see the driver holding the door open for the man in the tweed coat, and she certainly didn't see the man pick up a satellite phone and dial a number. "Allô? François?" Jean-Luc said into the phone, his voice sharp as a razor. "Cancel the meeting with Holloway and Finch, and get me the personnel file for a Chloe Evans from the restaurant." "Yes. Immediately. We have work to do." Sterling Vance checked his reflection in the elevator's polished brass doors. He looked perfect. The navy worsted wool suit was sharp, his tie was a power red, and his hair was gelled to geometric precision. He had forgotten about the waitress and the old man the moment he stepped out of l'Orangerie. They were background noise, static in the broadcast of his successful life. He was focused on one thing: closing the Leclerc deal. It was a French pharmaceutical giant ripe for a hostile takeover. Sterling planned to strip it for parts, sell off the research division, and pocket a 7-figure bonus. The elevator doors pinged open on the 40th floor of Holloway and Finch. Usually, the office hummed with the aggressive energy of trading. Phones ringing, analysts shouting, the smell of expensive coffee and ambition. Today, it was dead silent. Sterling frowned. He walked past the receptionist who wouldn't meet his eyes. He walked past the bullpen of junior analysts. They were huddled in groups, whispering. When they saw him, they scattered like cockroaches when the lights turn on. "What is going on?" Sterling muttered. "Vance!" The shout came from the corner office. It was Magnus Holloway, the senior partner. A man who chewed cigars and subordinates with equal enthusiasm. Sterling adjusted his cuffs and walked into the office. "Magnus, I'm ready for the 3 hours PM call with the French team. I've got the term sheet right." "There is no call," Magnus said. His voice was dangerously low. He was standing by the window, looking out at the grey skyline. He turned around, and his face was a shade of purple Sterling had never seen before. "The deal is dead." Sterling froze. "What? That's impossible. They were desperate. I had them in a corner." "You had nothing!" Magnus slammed his fist on the heavy oak desk. "I received a call 10 minutes ago from the personal secretary of Jean-Luc Valois. Do you know who that is?" "Valois?" Sterling racked his brain. "He's the majority shareholder of Leclerc, the silent partner. He's a ghost. Nobody sees him." "Well, somebody saw him today," Magnus hissed. He called to personally pull the plug on the merger. He stated that Holloway and Finch lacks the moral architecture to manage his family's legacy. He called us, and I quote, "a firm of uncultured barbarians led by a man who cannot distinguish a billionaire from a beggar." Sterling's stomach dropped. The blood drained from his face so fast he felt dizzy. A billionaire from a beggar. The restaurant, the tweed coat, the scarf, the pappy insults. "Oh no," Sterling whispered. "Oh no is right," Magnus growled. He mentioned a specific incident at lunch. Something about an employee of ours insulting him while he was trying to enjoy a bowl of soup. Sterling. "Where did you have lunch?" Sterling tugged at his collar. It suddenly felt very tight. "L'Orangerie." "But Magnus, you don't understand. He looked like a hobo. He was sitting by the kitchen. He was wearing a jacket from the Salvation Army." "That hobo," Magnus said, walking around the desk and getting inches from Sterling's face, "is worth 12 billion euros. He is known for being eccentric. He likes to walk the city without security to see how people treat him. It's a test, you idiot, and you failed it." "I can fix this," Sterling stammered. Desperation clawed at his throat. "I'll find him. I'll apologize. I'll grovel. Just don't take me off the account." Magnus stared at him with cold, shark-like eyes. "You have 24 hours. If that deal isn't back on the table by tomorrow close of business, don't bother coming back. You're done in this city. I'll make sure you can't get a job sweeping floors at a bodega." "I'll fix it," Sterling promised, backing out of the room. As he ran to the elevator, frantically pulling out his phone to Google Jean-Luc Valois, NY residence, His hands were shaking. He had humiliated the one man who held his career in his hands. But Sterling Vance was a survivor. He convinced himself it was just a misunderstanding. He would buy the old man a vintage bottle of wine, fake a sincere apology, and charm his way back in. He had never met a problem money couldn't solve. He didn't realize that while he was fighting for his bonus, the girl he had crushed was fighting for her survival. Chloe sat on the floor of her tiny studio apartment in Queens. Her bank app was open on her phone. Balance, $42.50. She had rent due in 3 days. $200. She had an electric bill due tomorrow, $85. And she had just lost her primary source of income. She had called Henderson 3 times, begging for her job back. The last time, he had blocked her number. The industry was small. If Henderson blacklisted her as difficult, she wouldn't get a table at a diner, let alone a fine dining establishment. Stupid, she whispered to herself, hugging her knees. Why did you have to speak French? Why did you have to be a hero? She looked at her framed diploma on the wall. Université Paris-Sorbonne, Linguistics and International Relations. It was supposed to be her ticket to a better life. Instead, it was a reminder of debt and failed dreams. She had come back to New York to care for her mum, and the gap in her resume had grown too wide. The only work she could find was serving food to men like Sterling Vance. A sharp knock on the door made her jump. Panic flared. Was it the landlord? He usually didn't knock. He just yelled through the wood. Chloe stood up, wiping her eyes, and crept to the door. She looked through the peephole. Standing in the dim hallway, which smelled faintly of cabbage and old cigarettes, was a man in a pristine black suit. He was wearing an earpiece. He held a thick, cream-colored envelope. Chloe opened the door a crack, keeping the chain on. Yes? Ms. Chloe Evans? The man asked. His voice was professional, devoid of emotion. Who's asking? I have a correspondence for you. It is urgent. He held the envelope up. It was heavy cardstock, sealed with red wax. It looked like something from a movie, or a royal summons. Chloe undid the chain and took the envelope. Is this a summons? Am I being sued? She thought of Sterling Vance. Had he sued her for disturbing his lunch? Quite the opposite, ma'am. The car is waiting downstairs. What car? Please read the letter. The man stepped back to give her privacy. Chloe tore open the seal. Inside was a single card with handwritten calligraphy. Mademoiselle Evans, you offered kindness when the world offered cruelty. You offered a voice when I was silenced. Now, I would like to offer you an opportunity. Please accompany my driver. Do not worry about your attire. Come as you are. Jean-Luc Valois. Chloe's heart hammered against her ribs. Jean-Luc, the old man. Valois. She remembered the name from her studies. The Valois family was French industrial royalty, steel, pharmaceuticals, media. Is this real? She asked the driver. Mr. Valois does not deal in fake gestures, the driver replied. We have a schedule to keep. Chloe grabbed her coat and her purse. She didn't look back at her depressing apartment. She walked down the stairs, out the front door, and gasped. Parked in front of her building, looking absurdly out of place next to the dented trash cans, was a Rolls-Royce Phantom. Neighbors were looking out their windows. The driver opened the rear door. Chloe slid into the leather interior. It smelled of vanilla and expensive cologne. They drove in silence into Manhattan, gliding through traffic that usually snarled lesser cars. They pulled up not to a hotel, but to a private residential skyscraper on Park Avenue, the kind of building where billionaires bought apartments just to store their art. The elevator ride was smooth and fast, opening directly into a penthouse that spanned the entire top floor. The view of Central Park was breathtaking. Jean-Luc was standing by the fireplace, no longer wearing the tweed coat. He was wearing a tailored navy suit that fit him perfectly. He looked younger, sharper, and incredibly powerful. "Chloe," he said, turning around with a warm smile. "Welcome." "Mr. Valois," Chloe managed to say. I don't understand." "Please sit." He gestured to a velvet sofa. "Tea? Or perhaps something stronger? Champagne?" "Tea is fine," she squeaked. A maid appeared instantly with a silver tray. "I owe you an apology," Jean-Luc said, sitting opposite her. "My little experiment at the restaurant caused you to lose your employment. That was not my intention. I underestimated the pettiness of Mr. Vance." "It's not your fault," Chloe said, clutching the teacup. "Mr. Vance, he's a difficult man, and Henderson is afraid of him." "Fair," Jean-Luc mused. "It is a powerful motivator. But loyalty, that is rare. You showed loyalty to a stranger, Chloe. You defended my dignity at the cost of your own livelihood. In my world, that is a commodity more precious than gold." He picked up a folder from the coffee table. "I have looked into your background. Sorbonne graduate, top of your class, fluent in French, Italian, and English. A thesis on cross-cultural negotiation tactics in European business. Is this accurate?" Chloe nodded, blushing. I haven't used my degree in a long time. The market was tough when I came back." "The market is foolish," Jean-Luc declared. "I am expanding my operations in North America. I am acquiring several companies. I need someone who understands not just the language, but the nuance. Someone who can read the room. Someone who can tell a king from a fool in a tweed jacket." He slid the folder across the table. "I want you to be my executive liaison for the New York transition. You will be my voice. You will translate, yes, but you will also advise." Chloe opened the folder. It was an employment contract. Her eyes went to the salary line. $12,000 per month, plus full benefits, plus a signing bonus of $20,000. She gasped, covering her mouth. "Mr. Valois, I can't accept this. This is charity." Jean-Luc's face grew serious. "It is not charity. It is an investment. I have a problem, Chloe. A problem named Sterling Vance, and Holloway and Finch." Chloe looked up. "What do you mean?" "They want to buy my company. They think I am weak. They think they can bully me. I need to teach them a lesson. I need to show them that the servants they ignore are the ones who hold the keys." He leaned forward, his blue eyes twinkling with mischief and cold calculation. "I have rescheduled the meeting with Sterling Vance for Friday. He thinks he is coming to apologize to me. But I will not be there. You will be there." "Me?" Chloe's eyes widened. "I can't face him. He terrified me." "He terrified the waitress," Jean-Luc corrected. "He will not terrify the executive liaison of Valois Industries. We have 3 days, Chloe. We will get you new clothes. We will prep you on the deal. And on Friday, you will walk into that boardroom, and you will own him." Jean-Luc extended his hand. "So, Chloe Evans, are you ready to stop serving the soup and start owning the restaurant?" Chloe looked at the contract. She looked at the view of the city that had beaten her down for so long. She thought of Sterling's laugh when he got her fired. She took Jean-Luc's hand. Her grip was firm. "I'm ready, Monsieur Valois." The next 3 days were a whirlwind that felt like a fever dream. Jean-Luc didn't just give her a job, he gave her an armor. Tuesday was wardrobe. Jean-Luc hired a personal stylist who had worked for Vogue. They didn't dress Chloe in flashy, sequined dresses. They dressed her in power stealth. Sharp blazers in charcoal and midnight blue, silk blouses, stilettos that clicked with authority on marble floors. "You are not a decoration," the stylist told her, pinning a hem. You are the shark in the water. The clothes should say, I cost more than your life, but I don't need to brag about it. When Chloe looked in the mirror, she didn't recognize herself. The messy bun was gone, replaced by a sleek, sharp bob cut. The tired eyes were hidden behind sophisticated glasses. The stain on her sleeve was replaced by Italian cashmere. She stood taller. Wednesday was strategy. Jean-Luc sat with her in his library for 10 hours. They went over the financials of Holloway and Finch. Here is their weakness. Jean-Luc pointed to a spreadsheet. Sterling Vance is over-leveraged. He bet his own money on this merger going through to cover bad debts in the Asian markets. If this deal fails, he doesn't just lose his bonus, he loses his liquidity. He goes bankrupt. So we crush him? Chloe asked, her voice steady. She was learning fast. No, Jean-Luc smiled. We let him think he is winning. And then we change the rules. You must know the details of the Leclerc patent portfolio better than he does. Chloe studied until her eyes burned. She memorized the patent numbers. She memorized the FDA approval dates. She memorized Sterling's biography. She learned that he had failed the bar exam twice before going into finance. Insecurity, she noted. He overcompensates because he's not as smart as he acts. Thursday was the test. Jean-Luc invited 3 of his toughest lawyers to the penthouse. He had Chloe run a mock negotiation. At first, she was timid. The lawyers interrupted her, spoke over her, used complex legal jargon. Stop, Jean-Luc commanded from the corner. Chloe, they are interrupting you. Why are you letting them? I wanted to be polite. Politeness is for dinner parties, Jean-Luc said sternly. This is war. If they interrupt you, silence them. Try again. By the end of the session, Chloe wasn't asking. She was telling. When a lawyer tried to question a valuation, she slid a paper across the table and said, The data is on page 4. If you had done your due diligence, you wouldn't be asking this question. The lawyer shut up. Jean-Luc clapped slowly. She is ready. Friday morning arrived. The sky was grey and ominous over Manhattan. A convoy of 3 black SUVs waited outside Jean-Luc's building. Chloe sat in the middle car. She was wearing a cream-coloured suit that screamed elegance. Her lips painted a deep crimson. Remember, Jean-Luc said over the speakerphone as the car moved. I am not coming in. I will be on the video link, but the screen will be off until the end. You are the face. They are expecting a scared old man. Give them hell. Understood, Chloe said. She checked her reflection. She didn't see the girl who cried in the alleyway. She saw Ilara. No, she saw Chloe Evans, executive liaison. The car pulled up to the glass tower of Holloway and Finch. Chloe stepped out. The security guards, who usually ignored couriers and wait staff, straightened up and opened the doors for her. She walked to the reception desk. I am here for the Valois meeting, she said. Her voice was cool, clear, and commanded attention. The receptionist looked flustered. Oh, yes. Mr. Vance is expecting, Mr. Valois. Mr. Valois is delayed, Chloe said, checking her watch, a Cartier tank that Jean-Luc had gifted her as a tool of the trade. I am his proxy. Please inform Mr. Vance that he has 5 minutes to seat us, or we leave. The receptionist frantically dialed a number. Mr. Vance, the Valois party is here, but it's a woman. Up on the 40th floor, Sterling Vance was pacing. He had ordered the best catering. He had rehearsed his apology speech. He was expecting the old man in the tweed coat. A woman? Sterling frowned at the phone. Probably his daughter or something. Send her in, and tell the team to stand up when she enters. We need to show respect. The double doors of the boardroom opened. Sterling Vance, Magnus Holloway, and 4 other senior partners stood up, straightening their ties, putting on their fake plastic smiles. Welcome, welcome, Sterling boomed, stepping forward with his hand extended, not really looking at the face of the person entering, just looking at the expensive suit. "We are so honored to—" He stopped. The woman walking in didn't take his hand. She walked past him, her heels clicking rhythmically on the hardwood. She placed a leather portfolio on the head of the table, the seat reserved for the chairman, and turned around. She took off her sunglasses slowly. Sterling blinked. He squinted. The face was familiar. The eyes. He knew those eyes. But the context was wrong. This was a power player. This wasn't— "Good morning, Mr. Vance," Chloe said. Her voice was the same one that had offered him the wine list 5 days ago, but now it held the weight of a gavel sentencing a criminal. "You?" Sterling whispered. His brain short-circuited. The waitress?" "Executive Liaison Chloe Evans," she corrected him, her voice slicing through the silent room like a knife. "And on behalf of Valois Industries, I'm here to discuss the terms of your surrender." Magnus Holloway looked from Chloe to Sterling. "Sterling? You know this woman?" Sterling's mouth opened and closed like a fish. She served me lunch on Monday." Chloe smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Yes. And you tried to have me fired for serving coffee to a man you called a vagrant who just happens to own the company you are desperately trying to buy." She pulled a chair out and sat down at the head of the table. She looked at the stunned room of powerful men. "Please sit," she said. "We have a lot to talk about. And Mr. Vance, if you snap your fingers at me one more time, the deal is off permanently." Sterling collapsed into his chair. He looked small. Chloe opened her folder. "Let's begin." The silence in the boardroom of Holloway and Finch was heavy enough to crush a man, and right now, that weight was resting entirely on Sterling Vance's shoulders. Magnus Holloway, the senior partner, was staring at Sterling with a look that promised violence. "Sterling," Magnus said, his voice deceptively calm. "Care to explain why the waitress you fired is sitting in the chairman's seat holding the Valois portfolio?" Sterling wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead. "Magnus, it's a tactic. It's a mind game. She's just a prop. Valois is senile. He probably thinks this is funny. Look at her. She doesn't know the first thing about M&A." Sterling turned to Chloe, forcing a sneer. "Listen, sweetheart. I don't know what the old man is paying you to play dress-up, but the adults are talking now. Why don't you run along and get us some coffee? 2 sugars." The other partners chuckled nervously, hoping the tension would break. Chloe didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. She slowly opened the leather portfolio, the sound of the paper sliding against the mahogany table, amplifying in the quiet room. "Mr. Vance," she began, her tone conversational but icy. "It is fascinating that you mention adults. Because according to the due diligence report I compiled last night, you have been managing this firm's assets with the maturity of a gambler in a Vegas casino." She slid a single sheet of paper across the table toward Magnus Holloway. "Page 1, Chloe narrated. "Mr. Vance claims that Holloway and Finch has the liquidity to purchase LeClaire Pharma for $4.2 billion. However, if you look at the footnotes regarding the Shadow Creek holdings in Singapore—" Magnus picked up the paper. His eyes scanned it. His face went grey. "Sterling," Magnus whispered. "What is this? You said the Singapore accounts were solvent." "They are," Sterling squeaked. "It's just a temporary cash flow issue. Once the merger goes through, we use the Valois assets to plug the hole. It's standard practice." "It is not standard practice," Chloe interrupted, her voice sharp. "It is fraud. You are trying to buy Mr. Valois' company using money you don't have to cover debts you shouldn't have incurred. You intended to strip LeClaire Pharma of its research division, specifically the Alzheimer's project that is dear to Jean-Luc's heart, and sell it to the highest bidder just to save your own bonus. Sterling stood up, slamming his hands on the table. You lie. You're just a waitress. You don't understand these numbers. Sit down, Sterling, Magnus barked. No, Sterling yelled, his composure shattering. She's a nobody. I had her fired. She was crying in the alleyway on Monday. She's nothing. Chloe stood up. She wasn't the tallest person in the room, but in that moment, she was the biggest. Yes, she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I was crying in the alleyway. I was terrified. I was worried about my rent. I was worried about my mother's medical bills. And do you know why? Because you, a man with everything, decided to crush someone with nothing just because you could. Just because you wanted to show off for your friends. She walked around the table, approaching Sterling. He actually took a step back. But here is the lesson you missed, Sterling, Chloe continued. When you push people to the bottom, they learn how to survive. They learn to watch. They learn to listen. And while you were busy shouting for your wine and mocking a man's coat, I was learning that you are weak. She turned to Magnus Holloway. Mr. Holloway, Valois Industries rejects your acquisition offer. Gasps went around the room. However, Chloe said, raising a finger, Mr. Valois is willing to make a counter-offer. Magnus leaned forward. What kind of offer? We will not sell Leclerc, Chloe said. Instead, Valois Industries is interested in purchasing the debt of Holloway and Finch. Sterling's eyes bugged out. You want to buy our debt? Specifically your debt, Sterling, Chloe smiled. Jean-Luc has already spoken to your creditors in Singapore. They were very happy to sell your promissory notes to us at a discount. As of 9 a.m. this morning, Jean-Luc Valois effectively owns you. Sterling collapsed back into his chair. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. So, Chloe said, returning to the head of the table and sitting down. Here are the new terms. Valois Industries will refrain from calling in the debt and bankrupting this firm immediately. But we have one non-negotiable condition. Name it, Magnus said instantly. He didn't even look at Sterling. We require a change in leadership, Chloe said. We cannot do business with a firm that employs, how did you put it, uncultured barbarians. She looked at the large screen on the wall. Jean-Luc, would you like to add anything? The screen flickered to life. Jean-Luc Valois was sitting in his penthouse, sipping espresso. He looked regal. He looked formidable. Good morning, gentlemen, Jean-Luc said. His voice filled the room. And good morning, Executive Liaison Evans. You are doing a magnificent job. He turned his gaze to the camera, staring directly at Sterling Vance. Mr. Vance, Jean-Luc said softly, do you remember me? I was the pappy at table 9. Sterling couldn't speak. He just nodded, pale and shaking. You told me that money talks, Jean-Luc said. You were right. My money is talking now, and it is saying goodbye. Jean-Luc looked at Magnus. Mr. Holloway, if you want your firm to survive the day, I expect Mr. Vance to be escorted out of the building within 10 minutes, without his severance, without his bonus, and without a reference. Magnus Holloway didn't hesitate for a second. The shark ate the wounded fish. You heard him, Sterling, Magnus said coldly. Get out. But, Magnus, I've been here for 10 years, Sterling stammered. Security, Magnus yelled. 2 large guards entered the room, the same guards who had opened the door for Chloe earlier. They grabbed Sterling by the arms. This is insane, Sterling screamed as they dragged him toward the door. She's just a waitress. You're listening to a waitress. As he was dragged past Chloe, she didn't gloat. She didn't laugh. She simply reached into her pocket, pulled out a $5 bill and tucked it into Sterling's breast pocket. "For the bus," she said softly. "It's a long walk to the soup kitchen." The doors slammed shut. Sterling Vance was gone. The aftermath was swift. With Sterling gone, the toxic culture at Holloway and Finch evaporated. Magnus, terrified of Jean-Luc calling in the debt, agreed to every term Chloe proposed. They signed a partnership deal that protected Leclerc Pharma and guaranteed ethical practices moving forward. Chloe Evans walked out of the building an hour later, not as a victorious conqueror, but as a professional who had done her job. She got into the back of the Rolls-Royce. Jean-Luc was there, smiling. "You were brilliant," he said, handing her a glass of champagne. "I watched the whole thing. The way you handled the Singapore debt, masterful." "I had a good teacher," Chloe smiled, clinking her glass against his. "But Jean-Luc, what happens to him?" "Sterling. He will survive," Jean-Luc shrugged. "But he will have to start over. Perhaps he will find a job where he has to serve people. It would be good for his soul." "And what about me?" Chloe asked. "The deal is done. Do I go back to—" "Go back?" Jean-Luc laughed. "Chloe, you just negotiated a $4 billion restructure in under an hour. You are not going back to anything. You are moving forward. I have an office waiting for you in Paris, if you want it. Or you can run the New York branch. The choice is yours." Chloe looked out the window. They were passing l'Orangerie. "Driver, stop," she said suddenly. "Is everything all right?" Jean-Luc asked. "I just need to do one thing," Chloe said. She stepped out of the car. She was still wearing her power suit, looking every inch the executive. She walked into the restaurant. It was the lunch rush. Jessica, the hostess, looked up, ready to give a snarky comment. But the words died in her throat when she saw Chloe's attire and the aura of confidence radiating off her. "Chloe," Jessica gasped. "You look expensive." Chloe walked past her. She went straight to the kitchen doors. She pushed them open. Marco, the chef, was shouting orders. When he saw Chloe, he wiped his hands on his apron. "Chloe, you came back. Did you get a new job?" "You could say that," Chloe smiled. "Marco, do you remember that onion soup? The one you made with the special stock?" "Yeah." The man who ate it was Jean-Luc Valois. He loved it. Marco's jaw dropped. "And," Chloe continued, "Mr. Valois is looking for a private chef for his New York estate. The pay is triple what you make here, and you never have to cook a Cobb salad again." Marco looked around the greasy, chaotic kitchen. He looked at the manager, Henderson, who was yelling at a busboy in the corner. "When do I start?" Marco asked, untying his apron. "Right now," Chloe grinned. As they walked out of the kitchen together, Mr. Henderson blocked their path. "Where do you think you're going?" Henderson demanded. "Marco, get back on the line. And Chloe, you're trespassing. I'll call the police." Chloe adjusted her glasses. She looked at Henderson with a mixture of pity and amusement. "Mr. Henderson," she said calmly, "I wouldn't do that. You see the corporate account for Holloway and Finch? The one you fired me to protect? What about it?" "I control it now," Chloe said. "And as of this afternoon, that account is cancelled. And I have a feeling a lot of your other high-end clients will follow suit when they hear how you treat your staff." Henderson went pale. "Come on, Marco," Chloe said, turning her back on the manager. "We have a car waiting." They walked out of the restaurant, leaving the noise and the disrespect behind them. Chloe climbed back into the Rolls-Royce, Marco sliding into the front seat with a stunned grin. As the car pulled away, merging into the stream of traffic, Chloe Evans looked at the city skyline. She wasn't invisible anymore. She had spoken up, not just for herself, but for the man in the tweed coat, and in doing so, she had found her own voice. Jean-Luc patted her hand. La vie est belle, non? Life is beautiful, no? Chloe smiled, a genuine, deep smile that reached her eyes. Oui, Jean-Luc, la vie est très belle. And that is how a waitress and a billionaire taught an arrogant banker a lesson he will never forget. It proves that you should never judge a book by its cover, or a man by his coat. Sterling Vance thought he had all the power because he had the loudest voice, but he forgot that true power is often silent, observant, and speaks French. What would you have done if you were in Chloe's shoes? Would you have given Sterling the money for the bus, or would you have left him with nothing? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of karma and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We have plenty